Hello, dingle hoppers and demolitions experts. My name is TVSkine, and having finally caught up with Riot's new champion releases, I thought maybe it was time to go back and do one of the things this series used to do, look at the older stable of League of Legends champions, and attempt to explain, well, what the deal is with them. And there is one champion whose deal does need some explaining, because, like a lot of champions, she was dropped into the game with half a dozen dangling lore threads promising exciting stories in the future, and then those threads were just left to dangle. And dangle. And dangle. And then, when they were done dangling, then they were left to dangle some more for about 8 years, with absolutely no movement in her storyline, so, Still, despite being delayed by COVID, Riot's animated series Arcane is finally on the horizon, promising us some answers about the histories of our favorite Piltover trio, Caitlyn, Vi, and nobody knows exactly where Jinx came from, although some remember a relatively innocent girl from Zaun, a tinkerer with big ideas who never quite fit in, as her bio puts it. The little bit of trailer we have for Arcane, though, rather implies that what turned Jinx from meek little girl to premium chaos gremlin was rather more than a case of mere social awkwardness. Regardless, Jinx begins to make a name for herself in Piltover with what you might from a certain point of view describe as overenthusiastic pranks. Releasing exotic animals from a zoo to crash a parade, moving street signs around at random to confuse travelers and trade, and well, a lot of what she does basically targets the rich and the powerful of Piltover, which ties in nicely to the class warfare themes that the narratives in that region are usually built around. She escalates her pranks and commensurately inflates her notoriety to the point where the Wardens of Piltover make her a priority public enemy. She also begins signing her pranks with graffiti, often very crude drawings of Piltover's famous enforcer, Vi, designed specifically to piss her off. And piss her off they do. When Jinx declares her intention to rob the biggest vault in the city, Caitlyn and Vi set a trap, and the ensuing confrontation leaves the building in ruins, and Jinx escaped. She's become something of a folk hero in Zaun, and the subject of satirical plays mocking the incompetence of the police, which obviously we stan, but as her lore is happy to imply, Jinx might have a more complicated endgame than her seemingly random crimes imply. Her obsession with Vi especially seems more than random happenstance. Of course, the obsession probably has something to do with the fact that they are sisters. Probably. This is something that Riot has only technically never officially confirmed, but it's one of those things that the community pieced together pretty quickly and everyone just sort of assumes is going to be true. Riot actually recently tweeted a picture celebrating Siblings Day, which is apparently a day that the Americans have, featuring Jinx and Vi, which they then hastily deleted when they realized that they might have accidentally tweeted spoilers. The Arcane trailer is teasing very heavily that it is going to be an origin story for the two of them, even ending on a shot of Jinx walking down a hallway. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume that, yeah, they're sisters and their relationship is why Jinx is fixated on Vi the way that she is. Speaking of that Arcane trailer, let's engage in a bit of semi-baseless speculation. Based on what the story seems to be gesturing at, my guess is that the backstory is going to turn out that Jinx is probably a genius-level kid inventor who, along with Vi, gets dragged into some kind of Zaun Piltover crime drama that is way over their heads. For example, perhaps they get their hands on some valuable Hextech crystals that street kids are not meant to have. And before that drama is all over, Jinx is going to be exposed to something. Chemicals, Hextech, excessive amounts of trauma, or hell, all of the above, and that triggers the process for her to become who she eventually ends up being, and sets in motion whatever events that will eventually culminate in Vi joining the Wardens to try and stop her, catch her, get her some help, or maybe, well, let's leave that for a different section of the video. The obvious comparison that a lot of people make with Jinx is Harley Quinn, who I have a What's the Deal video about, actually. Click the link in the card up there. I guess it's because they are both destructive women with punk aesthetics and a comedy theming, and that's not invalid. I wouldn't say there's no influence, but the similarities are, to me, very surface Harley Quinn, in her classic incarnation, is a circus-themed tragic victim of the Joker's abuse, and in modern incarnations, she's more of a bubblegum punk whose stories are themed around recovering from trauma, dealing with life and emotional issues, and found family themes. Jinx, in my opinion, is closer to something like an unholy fusion of Tank Girl and Freakazoid. She's a classic ammo belts and combat boots punk pinup, all bullet casings and rocket launchers, as funny and distractible as a puppy, and as volatile as a flamethrower at a fireworks factory. Her primary aesthetic is punk, which is a sentence that requires a lot of qualifiers, because punk is actually kind of impossible to pin down as a coherent aesthetic. It is changeable and flexible, and it evolves rapidly with the generations. Jinx, I would say, is like a mix of a sort of 70s, 80s anarcho-punk and more modern glam punk. She's got the ammo belts and combat boots, the heavy buckles and padded leather, you know, that whole military surplus vibe, but she pairs that with a flamboyant color scheme, that pink and purple and electric blue, and is moderately sexualized in booty shorts and a bikini top. And before I get any comments, by the way, saying a character is sexualized is an observation, not a criticism, and for Jinx specifically, I think it works pretty well in her design. Jinx's paleness is another notable physical feature. Paleness is often associated with poor health, being stuck inside, never seeing the sun, that sort of thing. With her, it's used to make her other colors stand out even more, a fact aptly demonstrated by comparing her current in-game textures to the textures that she launched with. Say hello to Flesh Tone Jinx. She'll be seeing you in your nightmares tonight. Anyway, besides the general weirdness of seeing Jinx with, like, saturated colors like this, notice how her tattoos and blue hair and weapons stand out much less distinctly against the warm tones of her skin here. Her paleness as a design feature helps make the other colors pop. Now, Jinx's paleness also kind of gestures towards albinism with her bright pink reddish eyes, which, as a designer, I think that kind of feature shouldn't be used to other a character. Like, it shouldn't be used to make them weird because albinism is a real condition that real human beings have, and they get enough stigmatism from their depictions in popular media already. Still, I don't think Jinx's design is, like, directly referencing albinism, it's just that it happens to overlap with the features, and I don't know, your mileage may vary. Anyway, in the pantheon of League women, Jinx is one of Riot's first real attempts to break the mold of body type. She's flat as a board, skinny, and rather wiry, not at all the typical curvy, busty babe that League has used as its default for most of its history. She's not, however, androgynous. Jinx's presentation is explicitly and overtly feminine, with her eye makeup, lipstick, punk bikini top, and long braids, and there's just a hint of hourglass shape in her body as well, with the narrow waist and the wider hip. Also, her minigun is pink and has bunny ears, and that femininity works for her, I think. I think her comedy-tinged Chaos Goblin bit works with a feminine energy, whereas if she was played masculine, she'd probably just feel too much like the Joker, really? Like, gender presentation is one of those things that can completely change the context within which you read a character, and for Jinx, I personally, anyway, feel that she works really well as specifically a feminine character. The animation segments of What's the Deal videos have had it too good for too long, I think. They have expanded and expanded and expanded and broadened their imperial influence over the series, and things like the lore, especially, has kind of suffered neglect and darkness as a result. So, let's introduce a new segment and speak not only of what the story has been, but what the story will, could, and perhaps should be. So, Arcane, the animated series that we're hopefully getting this year, looks set to primarily be a prequel, which will probably provide us a lot of answers about the internal lives and histories of the Piltover crew, but which won't really move their present-day story forwards, necessarily. I mean, I hope it does, but I doubt it. So, a worthwhile question to ask is, what would going forwards even look like? Where does Jinx's story, and by extension, Vi's story, go from here? Well, we've already reached a major climax in their relationship. Jinx robbed a massive Piltover vault and got into a cataclysmic confrontation with Vi inside it. What passed between them, we don't know, probably a lot of bullets at the very least, but by the end of it, the vault was destroyed and Jinx was gone, escaped to wreak havoc another day. The mystery of what happened between them is on its own a pretty solid hook for a story. Maybe have Vi refuse to talk about it and Caitlyn gets suspicious and tries to investigate. There's lots of character drama that you can mine there. To my mind, though, the natural progression in the storyline would be for Jinx to reach whatever it is her endgame is. That could be a reveal that her random chaos wasn't actually so random, that it was in fact a carefully calculated plan to achieve some kind of a goal. The story could do the classic supervillain thing where Vi and Caitlyn finally manage to capture Jinx, but then her schemes keep going off and disrupting the city while she's sitting there laughing in the jail cell. This would force her and Vi to finally have some talking time, and there's lots of good character development that can come from that. On the other hand, Jinx as this, secret mastermind genius who was only pretending to be a random chaos gremlin, while that would be a cool plot twist, it would also kind of massively retcon her character, and the chaos gremlin thing is what a lot of people find compelling about her. So, instead, maybe Jinx doesn't even really know what her endgame is. Maybe all she knows anymore is that pink-haired fat hands and the hat lady are important to her somehow, and that she's got to show them something. Chaos, the fragility of the system, pretty colors and lights when the fireworks factory goes up. Maybe all she really wants is for Vi to finally catch her, and stop her, and hold her, and make all the chaos make sense, like a big sister is supposed to. Her chaos, then, could be a sort of a cry for attention. She's full of chaos on the inside because of what she's been through, so she makes chaos on the outside to make people see how she feels. And she targets the rich and powerful of Piltover because she knows that they're the ones who made her hurt, that they're the reason street kids get chem-poisoned and go crazy. This, to me, seems to be the direction that Arcane is gesturing, that Jinx is going to be a character who is ultimately responding to some kind of a trauma, a terrible series of events that she goes through in the series that causes her transformation. This would also explain why Vi joined the Wardens. She needed their resources to find her sister, and she needs Caitlyn's connections as a member of the nobility to protect Jinx from all the people who want her dead. That would be a very dramatic version of the story, at the very least. Another option is WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, where, yes, Jinx is Vi's sister, but she's not, traumatized or broken, and she's not a secret mastermind. She's just wild and chaotic and destructive for no other reason except that that is how she enjoys being. Is it because of some kind of chemical poisoning? Sure, why not? There's probably some reason for it. But the backstory doesn't matter to her. What matters to her is that she likes explosions, and that she's really good at making them happen, and that playing chasing games with Vi and Caitlyn is fun. This is a viable path for the characters. Sometimes you don't need a complicated emotional backstory or character drama. Sometimes characters can just be who they are for no other reason except that they want to. For my money, though, that would kind of turn her into a Looney Tunes character. Her whole thing would just be haha explosions and hijinks, and there's not that many places you can go with that, I don't think. It wouldn't really lead to interesting characterizations or stories. It's an option, but not to my mind a very interesting one. What would be interesting, though... Okay, so let's do some plot twists. Let's speculate some crazy that isn't gonna happen, and might not be a good idea, but it sure would be fun if it did. So, first, what if Jinx is not Vi's sister? What if Jinx is just some Son maniac person who killed Vi's sister? What if that is the source of the obsession? Vi and her sister stopped Jinx from doing some kind of scheme in the past. Jinx kills Vi's sister, and that is why Vi joins the Wardens. To get revenge. Now, this would fully turn Jinx into, just a female version of the Joker, and I guess it would kind of turn Vi into Batman, but imagine that plot twist at the end of Arcane. Imagine Twitter reacting to that All right. Second insane idea. What if Caitlyn and Vi aren't trying to catch Jinx at all? What if the reason that Jinx escaped after blowing up the vault, after doing so many crimes in Piltover, is that Caitlyn and Vi let her? Because Jinx, Vi, and Caitlyn aren't enemies at all, you see. They've been working together this entire time to take down the system from the inside. And so basically what we would see in Arcane is that Jinx, Caitlyn, and Vi, accidentally expose some kind of massive corruption in Piltover and so on. But they're kids, so they can't really do anything about it. So they come up with a plan. Caitlyn is going to become a detective and work her way into the police force using her connections in the nobility. Vi is going to become an underground enforcer and establish a shadow network of allies, and Jinx is the spark that lights the fuse. She's going to start so much chaos in Piltover that the Wardens will have to accept Vi into their ranks to stop her, and then all three of them, working together, start taking down the corrupt aristocracy. Caitlyn using legal means, Vi using her underground connections, and Jinx with explosives when everything else fails. Now, is this ever going to happen? No. Would it even be a good idea? Well, I don't know, maybe not. Ideas always sound cool on paper before you have to sit down and actually make them reality, and then all the flaws crop up all of a sudden. But let me tell ya, if someone writes that fanfic, you bet your ass I'm gonna read it. So, to summarize, my 3 reasonable ideas for story directions for Jinx are secret genius who had a plan all along, broken bird ultimately acting out because of trauma, or what you see is what you get. And my crazy ideas are that Jinx actually killed Vi's sister and Vi became a warden to get revenge, or that Jinx, Caitlyn, and Vi are all working together to take down the corrupt aristocracy and their entire conflict was a cover-up all along. So, do you guys have any other ideas, whether reasonable or completely bonkers, for a direction that Jinx's story could take? Do let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if you enjoyed this segment as part of the video. Is it something I should keep in the future? I'm gonna be looking for feedback. Anyway, since I've added this segment and made the video even longer, I'm going to keep the animation segment short and under control and absolutely no getting distracted by the details. It should be doable to keep the animation segment somewhat under control this time around, because for all that Jinx is an iconic character and she still looks great in-game, she is a character model from 2013, and it shows, and one of the primary places it shows is, well, on her face right there, because Jinx has no face animation whatsoever. She can't because, at least as far as I can tell from looking at her, she doesn't have any animation bones in her face with which to animate her. She can't blink, she can't open or close her mouth, she can't really do anything except just move her head around, and so she relies much more on her whole body to communicate her mood, because her face is stuck permanently in this exact expression. And it's kind of a pity with her, really, because she's one of the characters who would really have benefited from having that facial animation, like that highly exaggerated facial animation we see nowadays on characters like even Seraphine and Gwen would do wonders for communicating Jinx's character, I feel. And it's the sort of thing that I really wish Riot would do smaller scale updates where they like add that kind of thing to an older character, but oh well, you take what you can get. Anyway, as usual, we'll start with Jinx's idle animation, and there isn't terribly much to say about either her minigun idle animation or her rocket launcher idle animation. They really are just the character is standing still, and they're doing a breathing cycle. Although, as usual, with League of Legends characters, the breathing cycle is somewhat exaggerated. Like, this is maybe a little bit much for idle movement if you were actually just a person standing still. But as ever, League of Legends animation is made to be seen from this perspective right here, and so all motion tends to be somewhat exaggerated so that it looks good from a greater distance. We should always keep this in mind when we are assessing animation in League of Legends. Her secondary idle animations, though, are where the character comes alive a lot more. We get much more of an insight into her attitude towards the world in general, but certainly her attitude towards the weapons and the technology that she uses. Take a look at how she's handling her minigun here. She puts it over her knee, she does a thing, checks magazine, who knows what it is, knocks it out, and then smacks it back in, puts the gun down on the ground, and just kind of gives it a whack. Builds up this elastic tension, and the gun sort of flies into the air, and she catches it. Now, what does that say about her relationship to the weapons that she uses? It says, for one thing, that she doesn't have any reverence for them whatsoever. Like, there's no sense that she gives a damn particularly about whether or not these weapons are in a good condition, whether they're being treated right. I don't get the sense that Jinx is the kind of person who would spend a lot of time taking apart, cleaning, and oiling a weapon. She just fire it until it stops working, and then throw it at someone and pick up another weapon. And you get that aspect of her relationship to technology from this animation. Like, it's the way, the attitude with which she treats this thing that tells us something about how she relates to it, and by extension, how she relates to the rest of the world. This is very poor gun safety behavior. Although, to be fair, it's like, I don't really know the safety protocols for handling a minigun. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments. But it's an insight into her character. It's an insight into how she thinks and how she behaves. It's also, this pose right here also gives us a lovely opportunity to see another feature of Jinx's character model, which is this. Jinx is meant to be very skinny. She's meant to be very skinny, but as you can see here, her character model is bending a little bit unnaturally to make this pose, but Jinx is actually just, like, on her character model especially, she is just absolute skin and bones. Like, there's no room for organs in here whatsoever. I don't think it's a huge issue on her specifically because, again, we see the character model from here, so it's not really, like, she doesn't read as that insanely thin, but it is a thing of, like, wow. that's like really, yeah, I think maybe the character modeler could have given her, like, enough room for intestines, maybe, because this is a little extreme. It's like her thighs are thicker than this. Oh, geez. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's just a funny observation of the construction of her character model. Moving on to another idle animation. This is one of her rocket launcher idle animations, and whereas the basic rocket launcher idle animation is just her standing still and breathing, this one will play if you let her stand still for a little while, because Jinx is, well, she's not one to stand still particularly, and it gives us some insight into her character. When Jinx has a rocket launcher on her shoulder, her primary instinct is to look for something, anything, that she can fire that rocket launcher at. And you can see that energy being expressed in this looping idle animation. All she's doing right is she's like, is there something to shoot? Is there something to shoot? Is there something to shoot up there? Is there something to shoot over there? Is there something to shoot in the other direction? She's looking for something to fire this thing at. And there's a very excited energy to her movement. I've slowed it down a little bit. Let me speed it up to full speed. And you really kind of get that sort of excited child looking for something to fire their water gun at. Like, that's the kind of energy that we've got here. It's very much like someone excited to play with their toys, which of course is exactly what Jinx is doing. And there's one thing I want to draw your attention to. Take a look at how she transitions from each of her poses. Like, transitions from that pose to that pose to that pose to that pose, because she does the same thing. She does this, that little thing right there. She does this little, she squashes down just a little bit, like this little moment of anticipation, and then she pops into the air, yoink, lands and does a little bounce, and then she snaps into her new position, and then she does a bounce, snaps into her new position, and that's like the whole movement aesthetic of her is this little popping animation that she's got going on, which gives her that very excitable energy, like that little pop as she transitions into one pose to another pose to another pose. That's really part of what gives this whole sequence the energy, like the vibes that it has. But you can really see like the process of like doing the little squash, dropping her weight down, doing the little tiny hop, changing the position of the legs, and then landing, and then catching the weight of the entire rocket launcher. And the catching the weight thing is actually also a big part of how they deal with Jinx's rocket launcher. If you take a look at her attack animation for the rocket launcher, playing back at full speed here, it's kind of jerky a little bit, but take a look at how it works. Like, Jinx does this thing where she leans forward in like the worst possible position in which to fire a weapon with massive recoil, which is standing on one leg, sort of slightly leaning into it. And then as the rocket launcher fires, we get like the usual thing with attack animations in League of Legends. The rocket launcher basically inflates to twice its normal size. And you can see that it basically flies off her shoulder, yoink, and pulls her backwards, and she sort of just barely catches it by landing on her back leg and catches the weight of it. And that's something that they pay attention to with Jinx's interactions with all of her weapons, even the laser gun, is that weight relationship between the girl and her weapons, where every time there's a recoil, she catches it with like her whole entire body is used to catch it. Like, it's a really, they have a really big physical effect on her. And that's part of what gives her attack animations especially sort of a cartoony vibe to them. Like, she is a little bit Looney Tunes as a character because she's all about those big explosions and those big reactions to explosions. And this is something I really like about her attack animations, is that sense of recoil. Here's another animation that tells you something about her attitude towards the world. This is one of her joke animations, which basically she just pulls out her weapons, makes them as big as possible, and says to everyone, hey, come get some, I want to blow some stuff up. And that's kind of, again, all about giving you the storytelling about the character, but it's also a great thing to look at for one of the little animation tricks that the animators do with the weapons, which is adjusting their size. And you can see this in particular on the minigun. Like, just look at this thing and how much it inflates yoink, it just blows up to like 3 times its original size for the purposes of being used for this particular animation. And that's something that the minigun especially does. Like when it's not in use, it basically just shrinks down so that it's the size of a purse. But when she wants to use it for something, whether that's attacking or taunting enemies, it blows up to like 3 times its original size, which is one of the lovely little animation tricks I really like about Jinx. And again, one of the things that contributes to her general sort of Looney Tunesy vibe and energy. One of the best animations, though, when it comes to giving you insight into what Jinx is like as a person, is her actual taunt animation, which is this thing right here. Because a lot of League of Legends champions have taunt animations that are where physically, in terms of the acting that they're doing, it's like they're doing some kind of cool thing where they're looking at their opponent and giving them a devastating put down for not being very cool. Like they have some kind of like sharpening their weapon thing or whatever going on. Jinx, though, she has a very different vibe, because her taunt isn't a, yeah, I'm cool and you suck. Her taunt is, come play. That's what this is. This is an invitation to chase her, to come play with her, to come blow stuff up, to come cause some chaos. And that is Jinx's personality as a character. Someone who will like childishly hop around and wave at you and go, hi, hey, come play with me, I'm gonna be annoying. But who also has a giant rocket launcher on her back and a minigun at her hip and a laser gun as well. Someone who is playful and fun and unhinged and dangerous, and all of that comes across beautifully, I think, in her taunt animation, possibly the least aggressive taunt in early League of Legends, frankly. Let's finish off with Jinx's other joke animation. This one is a little bit special, because it's the only one where she actually interacts with another character, that character being her rocket launcher, Fishbones. And the way it plays out is she puts Fishbones up on her shoulder. She says, hey, Fishbones, what should we do? And Fishbones will say something hilarious like, we should settle down and pay our taxes, or something along those lines. Basically acting as a kind of Jiminy Cricket voice of her conscience, to which Jinx will respond by punching him and putting him back on her back, because she's not interested in doing the sensible, responsible things. She wants to blow stuff up. Narratively, it's a little interesting that Jinx sort of imagines this voice of conscience for herself, which is her rocket launcher, which is trying to tell her to, like, maybe be considerate of other people and not blow stuff up. Not something that they've ever really done anything with, like most things in League of Legends, frankly. But again, there's this element of what is her relationship to the objects around her, to the things around her, and one of the things is that she treats her weapons like a child would treat an imaginary friend or a teddy bear. And again, this gives us a hint to her relationship to this technology. When Jinx is completely okay punching a rocket launcher, a thing which launches explosives, or smacking a minigun around, it's because her relationship to them is like a child's relationship to their teddy bears and their toys. This sort of semi-personal relationship, this complete ownership over the things, and also this embodiment of the thing with some level of soul or personality. Like, she has named her minigun Pow Pow and given it rabbit ears, right? And again, that tells you something about, like, Jinx's mental state. Her relationship to the world is that she's doing all of this for fun. Like, that's the personality that's being communicated through her voice lines and through her animations, is that she's just enjoying herself and having fun the way that a child would. And that comes across really well, I think, in this little sort of puppet routine, because it is the kind of thing that an overgrown child might do with a toy that they have, just for a lark, just for the fun of it. And it's just a lovely, and she's a fantastic ventriloquist as well. Look at that, her lips aren't even moving at all. Jinx is Riot's ambassador character for Wild Rift, and for good reason. First of all, she's popular, that helps, but also, Wild Rift is the faster, more chaotic version of League of Legends. At least until Riot builds an esports league around it, then everyone's gonna start taking it seriously all of a sudden. Ugh. But even if you have absolutely no other context for Jinx as a character, her design and her personality and the way that those things are communicated in her character makes her a perfect fit for that vibe. Jinx with her minigun and laser pistol and rocket launcher, Jinx with her mismatched tights, too many belts, 6-foot braids, electric blue hair, all skinny and over-enthusiastic. Even if you know nothing else about her, you look at Jinx and you understand instinctively that she is chaotic, she is dangerous, and she likes to have fun. That's why she's the perfect ambassador for Wild Rift, and that Silent communication, to me, is the mark of truly great character design. Hey, thank you very much for watching another episode of What's the Deal With? I finally got a chance to go back and look at an older champion. That kind of used to be the point of the series, actually, to look at the old champions, but people asked me to do it for the new champion releases, and the videos became more complicated, and it took longer to make, and I have other videos to work on, and Riot kept releasing new champions, and I don't know, creative projects always evolve past your ability to control them. It's just a fact of life. I want to at least try and do What's the Deal videos about something other than League of Legends champions again at some point. I was working on one about a superhero character, and that turned out to be nearly impossible to summarize in a video because, God, superhero lore is so exhausting. But I was thinking, I don't know, maybe an Apex Legends hero or Final Fantasy character. Ultimecia from Final Fantasy VIII would be interesting, but I don't know if anyone would be interested. Anyway, I'm supposed to self-promote. YouTube is an algorithm platform, and the algorithm only cares about engagement. So if you want to help me out, you can click some button. You can click like, you can click comment, you can click subscribe. Like whatever button you like, you can just click on it, and it helps in the algorithm. If you want to support the channel more directly than that, then I have a Patreon, a merchandise store, and a tip jar. You can use them if you want to, and it helps me pay for rent and bills and stuff. Speaking of which, thank you to Jean-Mathieu Lepage, R2 Norlin, Chill Pangolin, Ink, Tiger, Jay, Adnan Ramanovich, and RC Scooter for joining the Patreon this month. You help me do this for a living, and I can't thank you enough. Anyway, last bit of self-promotion, I promise. Subscribe to my Let's Play channel for Let's Plays, and if you want more League of Legends champion analysis, I'm putting up mini reviews on my Shorts channel daily, and they look like this. Rear forward Brigadier Admiral Kled is a Yordle who makes his home in the Noxian hinterlands. He's hung around the Noxian tribe since before the founding of the Empire, and like a lot of Yordles, he has absorbed the general spirit of his region, which in this case has turned him into a screaming, brawling hillbilly who wants everyone and everything to get off his property. Nice burn on imperialism there. Lord Colonel Major Centurion Kled is joined by his Dracolops, Skarl, who is as immortal and indestructible as he is stupid and cowardly, making him probably the perfect foil for the violent lunatic he carries into battle. As a design, Lieutenant Sergeant Commodore Kled is mostly quite understated, wearing a fairly sensible dark combat uniform and hat, balanced out by his enormous bushy white face, huge mouth, scars, and glowing eye. That face makes him tremendously expressive and highly appealing. Skarl is much more colorful, and with his huge floppy crest ears and prehensile tongue, he balances out Sir Admiral Major Kled's Yosemite Sam sharp-toothed level of violence with dumb lizard cuteness. The two of them make a perfect Looney Tunes comedy duo, at once opposites and complementary, and it is impossible not to be cheered up at least a little bit by their antics. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to wear a mask and wash your hands, take the vaccine when it comes, and try to act in solidarity with those who are working to make the world a better place.